Now
Good.
we're on. What's up, guys? Welcome to
Good, mate.
another episode of the Trailblazers. Today, I've got somebody who has run with me a couple times. He's part of a mob of runners under somebody you've heard on the previous podcast. His name is Daniel Lucchini. And Luke actually finished running an ultra marathon of 50K in Sydney not so long ago. And the reason I wanted to bring on Luke today is because I consider him to be an everyday hero. And why I call him an everyday hero is because he's also a busy father of 3. The reason that is so important is, in my opinion, we forget that raising children is probably one of the most important things society needs ever. We need to raise good children, good people, because then they become the leaders of tomorrow. And I think every father, every mother who is doing their best to raise their children needs to get more credit. And it doesn't mean that they're any less than somebody who, say, runs 25 kilometers a day like David Goggins. I think it's very, very important, and we need to be reminded of that. So, Luke, welcome to the podcast.
Mate, thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're on, man.
This is a bit of a step out of a comfort zone for me. So if I make some hiccups just with the whole idea of public speaking, I apologize.
No need to apologize. It's just real. You know, the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is because you're not a podcaster.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, a lot of people are moving into that space where everyone's trying to be a podcaster, including myself. And we forget that sometimes the stuff you see on Instagram, on YouTube, these are all trained speakers.
Yeah.
And we lose that reality because, I mean, there's many times when you meet somebody who has a strong media presence, but when you speak to them in person, they are completely different from the way they actually speak.
You're right, trained to talk to the media and other podcasters, I suppose.
Exactly. So I just wanted to have a real conversation with somebody who's not in that space.
Hey, mate, thank you.
When you first started, you mentioned that you wanted to step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, well, for me, I've had a couple of offers from other people to join their podcast. There's some local guys here. It's a bit of a comedy thing, and one of them known quite some time, the other one a little bit less. And I hadn't got around to it. And then a friend of mine's father has a radio show based out of Campbelltown here every Wednesday night. And he's been on to me for 2 years now, and I avoid it all the time. Although he's a good friend, and I say, yeah, I just never have, just out of fear, I suppose. So this is it.
This is the first one?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, brother. How do you feel so far?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I suppose being at home is a bit more comforting than if I was to record this at the radio studio down in Campbelltown or at the other guy's studio. Yeah, a good way to start, I suppose. Plus,
Yeah,
I've got to know you the last year or so. Yeah, it's comforting.
yeah. I think that's great. I think it's good to have something more gentle to start off with. Like a radio show is a little bit more intimidating. There's a studio, there's mics everywhere, you're in a space you don't know. The environment's just different. But like you said, you're in your own home, you're on your own couch.
Yeah. No, it's nice. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. My pleasure, man. You mentioned something earlier about having that fear.
Yeah. So to be real, like we said we would from the start, the fear's always been in me from everything, right? Sports as a younger age, uh, finances, constantly changing career paths. The fear never ever leaves me. It's there 24/7. And like we said, we talk about fatherhood and whatnot. That's one of the scariest things ever. Uh, I don't know if I was ever ready. I don't know if anyone's ever ready fully, but it scared me right from the get-go, and I'm scared of failure, uh, scared of doing some things the way my parents did, where I felt I could do my kids better, and then in other ways, scared that I wouldn't do things as well either. Yeah, I don't know. It's a constant fear, I suppose, just to get. I don't want to get things wrong.
Yeah, well, when I speak about fear with a lot of the other guys that I coach, a lot of fear comes from just caring.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I
like
agree with
you
that.
care about, in this context, you care about raising your kids well.
Yeah,
And that in itself is not a bad intention to have.
no, I agree. I agree. It's just it's something I'm learning to deal with better now. Like especially me and you chat a little bit, and Dan definitely. Um, how much of it's rational is something I'm navigating these days. Um, because we're always okay, right? Like no point ruining right now. You just handle it when you get to it. But it's
Yeah.
just it's living. It's uh, not always happening.
Yeah. Sometimes we just become consumed by the fear of the future
Yeah,
when we really should be focused on the present and learning from the past.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, that's. I mean, I'd hear some psychologists describe it as the anxiety is only just a fear of the future, and depression's a fear of the past, right? Like, and that's a very bland and umbrella sort of term, but I sort of resonate with that a bit.
Yeah. Well, we
Um,
live in three timelines. Sometimes we live in the present, some people live in the future, and then some people live in the past. And sometimes you do it all three in one day.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think to go into it further, like my childhood had some moments of we couldn't afford a lot, right? And I see that in me now, where I've never struggled financially since my kids have been born, but I never want to, and it's always there. I always think about it. And don't get me wrong, I'm a very irresponsible spender at times. I have 40 pairs of running shoes and just 2 feet. But so there's that.
The
But
running justifies it now, though, right?
yeah, yeah, somewhat. Somewhat. I got a lot of basketball shoes too. I never played that. But yeah, so that's just part of it. So I know there's some of that in me that's it's not rational, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe there is some hangover from childhood with some of that stuff.
Yeah, there's a saying that I heard long time ago, but it's, if you are born in scarcity, it never leaves you. If you were born in abundance, that never leaves you either. And the example they were giving was, I'm of the same boat as you. We didn't afford much growing up. So for us, the scarce money conversation was always something at the dinner table.
Yeah,
I still have it.
yeah,
But there are people who we can probably profile them, eastern suburbs, northern suburbs. They've grown up with generations of wealth, and
yeah,
they have never had the conversation of, I don't think we can afford this, not for another few months. They've
yeah,
never had that conversation. So the way they see the world is a lot more open, and there's a lot more possibility for them.
yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, I just think it's just in my life personally, like you said, not affording everything and always having that fear of not. Like I want my kids to have it. I know the material things are not what truly makes you happy, but I know how I felt being a kid without the Nike sneakers, and I
Mhm.
don't want my kids to have to do that. So, although I do waste money on myself too, I make sure my kids get the things that I couldn't, where possible too. And I think up until recently, we lived in a economic times where the wages were okay versus the cost of living to afford more Ninja Turtles toys or more Barbies or more games at Time Zone. Whereas I know for the wages with my parents versus the outgoings, it was times were tougher in Western Sydney, man. We didn't do it easy at all.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, we're definitely of that same, probably different timeline, but similar struggle because of the how my parents immigrated over here. They probably lived just the same life that your parents would have lived in the economic way, but just one generation down, or like 10 years down, because of
Yeah,
the immigrant lifestyle.
yeah,
Yeah, so I
definitely.
understand what you're saying.
So yeah, there's that fear in me constantly, and then And to elaborate on the other part, right? This, I don't think my wife would be upset with me talking about it, but this is a, you're the second person I only ever talked about this with, and whatever listeners now. My wife was told she'd never be able to have kids, and I accepted that too. So I didn't think I'd ever be a father. And when it came about, I definitely wasn't ready. I'd accepted that it wasn't happening in my lifetime. And I don't know how I felt about that. And I can hand on heart say now, I struggled and I still do. And my relationship with my son, firstborn, is definitely rockier than with my two daughters, second and third born. And I don't know if that's because I wasn't ready, but there's just, or maybe it's because he's a boy, you treat your son a little differently, maybe higher expectations, or just the father daughter relationship can be different. But there's definitely something where I wasn't ready, definitely wasn't ready. And I
Can
don't
you
love my kids differently. It's just, yeah, I never thought that day would come.
can you take me back to, well, the moment you found out that you were going to have a child?
I was working night shift as a mechanic then, and if you've ever worked night shift for a period of time, it takes its toll on you physically and mentally anyway. So for me, working as I was the manager, it was my job to keep the place running. I had a lot to take on for, 12, and I did some 24, 30-hour shifts at this place. So in some dark places, right? And my wife had called. We weren't married, actually. She called midweek and said, I'm pregnant. And my brain, what I remember of it was just saying, like, no, it can't be. Are you sure? But in saying that, I don't remember it well. Maybe there was a certain amount of shock or something. I remember getting the phone call, but I can't really elaborate much. Probably some shock.
It sounds like also you were very sleep deprived if it was a 30-hour shift.
Not necessarily that one, but that
Okay.
particular place and that time in my life, yeah, yeah, there was some massive hours. Like, I'm hoping this can translate into ultra running sooner or later. You spend enough time awake, you hallucinate a bit, and
Yeah.
I hear what they go through on the big 100+ mile runs.
Yeah, they sometimes they nap. They nap
Yeah,
on the course and keep running.
definitely, yeah. But no, so to answer that question, man, I don't really remember the phone call well, but I know it was midweek and I remember being in shock of sorts
Yeah.
and then navigate it from there, right? Like ultrasounds and blood tests and a million and one scans that go with having a baby,
Yeah.
yeah, developing, becoming ready to meet the world.
Yeah. Do you mind if we explore that a bit? Because I'm curious about what you were
Yeah,
thinking about life before you had even the news of your child. And
yeah,
then as the little baby is developing in the oven, and then when you actually became a father, like you would have gone through such a huge narrative change in your life.
definitely, definitely, but probably not quick enough in the true responsible sense, right? So I did a lot of drugs and alcohol for a long, long time, right? And I have no regrets. I'm the person I am today because of every day before this one. But I can't remember when we found out, well, my wife was pregnant with my first. I I don't know if I'd given away a drug career, right, by that point. I don't know. But there were years of just reckless partying, right? Social anxiety. So you just you did drugs and drank a lot to fit in and go to parties and nightclubs and raves and whatever it was everyone else was doing. Um, I never really had a passion for it. It was just part of what we did. I'm going to say we, yeah, just me and a lot of friends. So at that point, I think there was a lot of partying still. Life had to change pretty quickly because at that point in time, without a mortgage, without any kids, working night shift many hours plus the loading allowances you get, like, and I wasted money back then, bad, on every useless thing under the sun. So all that started to change. for sure. Man, there were some probably blurry moments or foggy memories amongst all that, right? So I remember going to many appointments with my wife. There was like plenty of ultrasounds and GPs, and you go and see the it's not pediatricians. There's names for like the midwives and stuff like that at the hospital clinics, and I tried to go to all of them that I could because
There's like an
working night.
obstetrician,
Yeah,
there's a gyno as well, I think.
yeah, there's heaps,
Yeah.
and like plenty of names that I probably wouldn't even remember now. But night shift at least afforded me the ability to get to those because they were all daytime appointments. So that was kind of cool. And then you have time to absorb it, right? And accept that this is now happening in your life. And then, man, fast forward from that phone call to 9-ish months later, and after a long labour, he had to arrive via an emergency cesarean, which is a pretty big ordeal because there's lots of monitoring of the baby which goes on, and heart rate changes, and even before your offspring's in this world, like you're terrified for their safety. So this is kind of your first experience into that. You deal with so many more, especially in the first few years, with fever and concussion and all kinds of stuff that toddlers do. But yeah, even before he was born, when they say heart rate's dropping to an unhealthy level, my wife had what they call gestational diabetes, which is something that only happens in doesn't necessarily mean you're diabetic as a day-to-day life, but you have to heavily monitor your blood sugar levels during pregnancy, which can have some effect on the baby. He arrived via cesarean and then had to go into special care unit where I think they have many babies in those humidity cribs. I can't remember if he was in one, but I know he had blood sugar and temperature issues for a couple of days. So yeah, that's like a welcome to first grade about how much fear you can have over the safety of your child.
Yeah, of course. And I've
Yeah,
had a few friends now have their first child, and they all describe to me there's this drop, as in deep inside, they feel this incredible drop when their baby first comes into the world. And
yeah,
suddenly something changes inside them. They see their little human and they have this incredible protective instinct over this little ball
yeah,
of organs and little brain and everything,
yeah,
and they can't describe what it is.
yeah.
But
It is
could you
indescribable.
describe what you felt in that moment when he came into the world?
I think it is pretty indescribable in a lot of ways. For him to be born by cesarean, the way it's done is still with modern medicine, man. They still just use a scalpel and cut your wife's abdominal open, and they literally attach a bandage as a rope and pull that thing back. And the doctors are like, don't look, like you're not going to want to see that. So they reach in and take the baby out, and he cries straight away, which is a good sound. We've watched enough Grey's Anatomy to know that's supposed to happen.
Mhm.
And then um, cut the umbilical cord, which is a pretty special moment, like many dads will tell you about. Um, and then I remember him going on to like a special bed with like some kind of infrared heater because it's just a warm zone for the baby to be in while they count the toes and tell you whether you. Well, we knew he was a boy. We found out from the gender on that one, but yeah, they give him a good once over and yeah, start the process of becoming a citizen, right? Like your injections and your blood tests and then yeah, he went off to the special care unit where they then stitched my wife back together. And that's a weird moment in itself because I got to hold him. My oldest, his name's Zach. I got to hold Zach, but my wife couldn't. So that's a weird thing, right? For a mother to be, yeah, your whole abdominal cavity split open, and now you've got to go through a bit of a surgery type thing to have all that put back together, and your own recovery, and then you kind of get wheeled around to see your baby in an hour or so. Yeah, I never really asked her too much about that from her side, but yeah, I can see how that would. It wouldn't be the fairy tale you'd expect, hey?
No, it'd be quite an intense ordeal, actually. I think I'd imagine you just want to hold your kid. You just gave birth
Yeah,
to your child. You want to hold them and be close to them, but instead she's got to deal with these stitches, all this bleeding, all these people around her trying to make sure she's okay. But even for the child, even he's got you, that which is great. But I'm sure in that moment, even though he's not speaking words, he would love to be with his mother as well.
yeah, yeah. And look, I suppose there's good and bad in that modern medicine side of things, right? Too, because once upon a time the baby would have just been left with mum, and you wouldn't necessarily know about the finer things where his blood sugar was checked and temperature and all that sort of stuff. So it was pretty important that he ended up where he did. Maybe it would have been life threatening, maybe not, but he got good care, definitely, and he was where he needed to be. It's just I think you picture things differently based on, I mean, other people's experiences, maybe movies, who knows? But you
Mm,
just kind of think it would be a bit different.
yeah, yeah. When Zach, when you brought Zach home, I mean, you mentioned earlier that weren't necessarily ready for him
Yeah,
into the world. So run me through when he came into the world. What was going on in your mind? Had you accepted and did you feel ready in that moment?
yeah. I think I felt somewhat ready. And look, as ready as you can be before that moment. Uh, you've got 9 months to prepare yourself, right? And you do a lot of shopping for furniture and repainting a room, and there's plenty of things that go on that kind of are preparing you, even if you're not consciously thinking they are. So yeah, I never really thought closely about that, but yeah, there's plenty of stuff, man, with you know bottle sterilizers and baby monitors and cribs and change tables, and said at the time we rented a place, and I worked night shift with a pretty good income. So with your first child on the way, man, we spent some money, and um, so there was preparation there. But definitely something different happens when they arrive, when you hear them cry. But as I said, even before that moment, when there's a health risk to your child, even before they've arrived into the world, that's that's something different too. You automatically have that protective instinct and helpless feeling because you can't do anything. So yeah, that's kind of, I can't really say much more on that. And after that, man, it's you can have all the books in the world, and you're gonna, if you ever become a parent yourself, you'll realize how many opinions come your way,
Mm,
um, based on some people that aren't even parents too, right? And
mm.
you'd like to think most of it comes from a good place, but you pick up and learn from everybody. Yeah,
Yeah, well, everyone's only really doing it at best 2 or maybe 3 generations. And I mean that, you have your child, maybe you have first-hand experience if you have your own child. And if you are some sort of expert, maybe you do some studies and you give advice to people who are 10, 15 years later. And then
yeah,
maybe if you're not dead by then, you give some more advice to other. So you've only got 3 or 4 generations if you consider yourself an expert to
yeah,
assess whether the advice you give is actually useful. So everyone's only doing the whole fatherhood thing once,
yeah,
really. I mean, who's gonna say they know it all when most of the knowledge we have keeps getting discarded? In fact, there's a lot of pushback against Western scientific methods of raising your children because there's now more investigations into the tribal ways of raising children and how they have a completely different method of raising a child than what the experts in the scientific community would say.
Yeah, definitely. I agree there. But even the conversations with just midwives within the hospital, some of them, older women, say 50s, 60s, whatever it was, and you would talk and said, I thought you did this baby on the side, you wrapped this way. And they said, look, I've been in this job for 40 plus years and I've seen it change 10 times. It's just that more research comes out about this. We go back to the old way, we come back to a different way. But I think for the most part, you've got no choice but to learn, right? This helpless being is completely reliant on you, so it's it's not an option to fail. We were lucky to have my mum and my wife's mum, so I'm one of five, and my wife's one of three. So two pretty accomplished mothers in their own right, who we all survived.
Yeah.
So we took a lot of advice there. Still do. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom in the people who've actually done the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
people who say they rely on a scientist who hasn't raised children but has read papers versus a bunch of grandmothers who've raised 100 children between them.
Yeah.
I'd rather trust the grandmothers.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree, mate. It's real world hands-on experience.
Exactly. I wouldn't
Yeah.
trust a mechanic who only reads textbooks.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree, mate.
Yeah. There's a theory of mine. Maybe it's not really mine. Maybe I've read it somewhere, but I think it helps explain that drop that a lot of dads get when they first become one, which is there's something called the spirit of the father. There's the spirit of the father, which is a spiritual term, I suppose, where you can only access this part of yourself or your spirituality when you actually bring a child into the world. And the
Yeah.
spirit of the father is something along the lines of you can't describe exactly what it is, but you can describe the changes that it makes in a man. They become more responsible because they've got someone relying on them. They become more patient. They start to think about things greater than themselves, not particularly for themselves, but greater than themselves.
Yep.
And they feel this groundedness. They feel this weight, like they walk around more firmly attached to the earth. They're less wispy. They're more able to withstand things because now they have this spirit which is passed on from generation to generation, but it only activates when you actually bring something into the world.
Yeah, I reckon I can agree there. To go into every point, I don't know if responsibility has taken time for me. Um, there's a love that you can't explain, that's for sure. It's the first time your child gets an extreme fever, the first trip to the hospital, you've never known a love and fear in the same moment. Um, this is your baby, and they're helpless. You're helpless in many cases. Um, yeah, that's a feeling never had before. With every other person through trauma, injury, accident, death, whatever it may be. When your own child's in the thick of it, that's totally different. But yeah, I suppose the other things are definitely there. Um, to think about them and elaborate, I don't know if I can, but you definitely have a responsibility to provide, like, and humans, primates in general, right? Like as young, pretty useless, We're reliant on parents for like it's going to be a minimum of 15 years, right? Um, so yeah, you do have to step up in a hurry, and I don't think I did for a long time. Like you get by, you do what you've got to do, but your own fears, past anxieties, traumas, whatever it is, I was far from perfect. Still am, but improving.
What do you think was your challenge when Zach came into the world?
Uh, Look, initial shock, right? Because I didn't expect this to ever happen, and you come to terms with that. So you've got to unlearn that part to start with. But then from there, selfishness has to change a lot too, because any finances or time now need to be shared. So they're definite challenges. But then through good and bad, like flaws from my dad. So my parents are divorced, right? So I've got a stepfather as well. Um, so things that you learnt from them, good and bad, right? You want to you want to avoid making mistakes that you feel they made. Improve on things that you think you can. Uh, y- y- I think just being the best you can for your kids is always there in the back of your mind. Um, but I can say hand on heart through, although I'd stopped doing any kinds of drugs probably before my son was born or very close after, I didn't deal with fear and anxiety all that well, and alcohol was a big thing. And that continued for a while, right? Um, so to put my finger on an exact challenge, I'm going to say all of it. Every single part of it, right? You've got to feed this child, you've got to bath them, you've got to keep them warm, got to change nappies, you get up through the night, you sterilize bottles. It's a full-time job in its own right. So mothers these
Absolutely.
days have to work, um, and it becomes a bit more of a community thing through more childcare, more grandparents involved, aunties, uncles. We had a lot of help. Um, but yeah, good luck, financing a way of life these days without two working parents.
Yeah,
So
that's a whole issue in its own. That's uh
yeah,
that's something completely different. I think that is such a big issue that is so hard to solve if you're trying to do it alone.
yeah,
If you're, it's reserved for people who are in that top 10%. And look, we
yeah,
can argue that you can become that top 10%, which is true. Like we all can.
yeah,
However, whether you have the background, the capacity, and also even just the postcode to be able to make that happen is
yeah,
not equal for everyone, which again is life. Life's not fair. That's just the way it is.
yeah,
But I think it's important that everyone's aware that if you're struggling with a 2% income, that's probably normal because of the economic conditions currently.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's not just. I mean, it is part of the economic conditions, of course, but we've become accustomed to a way of life that's significantly different too, right? Even to the devices we're using right now, um, the shoes, the cars, the whatever it may be. Life was simpler when I was a teenager, that's for sure. With technology and just perpetual growth, it's just things have become harder to afford.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're two working parents. So yeah, back to what you were talking about. So the challenges are there for both of us. I go back to work after a month, maybe. My wife might have been engaged at the time, probably were. She took, I think she got a year at half pay or something like that. And because we weren't in a home mortgage at that point, it was okay. It was doable. And then yeah, all that changes down the track. But yeah, to answer your question simply, man, the whole lot's a challenge.
Yeah.
It really is. There's every single part of it, and even right now, he's 12, and there's just different challenges. Kids at school bullying, trying to keep him active, uh, sports teams, homework, study groups, just his general well-being. It never stops. They just change.
Yeah. We're going to touch into that in a sec. I want to just zero back into something you mentioned about fear and anxiety, how you hadn't processed it and dealt with it properly
Yeah.
when Zach was born. Could you give us an example of what you mean by that? How did that play out in how you were able to carry on as a father?
Man, I was probably just a high functioning alcoholic, realistically. I worked, I had time off work through bad hangovers, but I I probably didn't deal with stuff well for a long, 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 long time. And uh that was before being a father, and it probably just added to it, right? So you still get life done, but just not to the best of my abilities for some time, that's for sure. The whole family didn't get the best of me for many years. And yeah, becoming a dad when you weren't ready definitely added to that. Probably haven't really spoke about that much till now, but not to make any excuses, right? Because I bought the alcohol, I drank it, but yeah, through whatever else you'd never dealt with prior to that, I've just added another fear in this little boy to my life. So yeah, we got by, but from him being born till 12 years old now, probably 10 of those years were pretty heavy drinking. We got stuff done. We had the family holidays. We had two other kids in that time. But yeah, maybe I just never processed things properly. Not really sure how to go much further into that, but
You don't have to. I mean, doesn't it's just what you think.
I'm not scared to. It's just I think it's all part of growth. I can't really nail anything. That's for sure. It was just a ongoing fear, which is still there now. But I feel like I deal with things better through everything I've learned through yourself. I talked to Will a bit. There's Eamon, there's Sasha, there's Dan, of course. Um, I've got whole other groups of running friends who may not talk to as much, but they're there, right? You just a far better community in my corner now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And recognizing that the anxiety existed, I dealt with it with alcohol. Um, yeah, I know nothing's inherently bad. It got me to this point, but I could have dealt with things far better earlier. That's for sure.
When did you decide that you had to stop drinking?
Heaps of times, heaps of times. Through big, big arguments, I've been separated from my wife more times than you could imagine. Um, the final time probably came about because I think we were all starting to forget a little bit how much we all struggled through lockdowns. Um, so, and my drinking got worse then. We had, I never stopped working. So I was unbelievably busy, but unbelievably lonely at the same time. So every job I went to, the people were wearing masks and gloves and forever washing, and then they would keep their distance from you. So I work in air conditioning, and there were residential customers. It got busier because all those people worked from home. We were considered an essential service. So we didn't stop. So you work your ass off, but never see people in a good light, that's for sure. There was never real good interactions. Phone calls with the office, and occasionally you would get to see some of the other boys from work because anything that was multiple person jobs were mostly avoided, right? But then you come home and you'd see your family, but remember, we couldn't even see our neighbours. Um, things changed on and off, and we could walk in little areas, and people started to push boundaries with talking to neighbours, but that became a toxic thing in its own right because all you could really do was we would sit on each other's driveway and just drink beer for hours and hours and hours on end. If you saw a car drive down the street, you walk back into your own house at the risk of being caught by, authorities for whatever it was. The lockdowns were a bit more strict than a lot of people remember.
Especially for
So
Sydney's West. Especially for Sydney's West.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, I my drinking increased, and I can't really. I think you're probably heading towards, what got me to change, or it was a combination of a few things. relationships breaking down left, right, and center. Um, Wife, sisters, um, things just weren't perfect in a lot of areas. And then I I'd given up smoking cigarettes too, which meant sometimes you'd drink more because it would just take the boredom away. And I put on a fair bit of weight after this period. And I think it all tied in together with I know you shouldn't really change anything rapidly, right? But they all just seemed to come hand in hand for me. Was I'd significantly cut down drinking, changed a lot of bad diet habits, and then which in turn led to becoming active again. And I started skateboarding again, or it started out with walking, a bit of lifting here or there. So I don't think there was any light bulb moment for that, lack of a better word. It's just a series of things. But it was repetitive, right? Like I'd quit drinking that many times. I'd cried and promised to my family I'd never let them down again through being hungover and violent. And like I never hit anyone or hurt anyone, but it was just a lot of nasty words and um, you hurt people emotionally. So yeah, it was several times over the past 10, 12 years. But yeah, about 2 years back, to yeah, I can't think of a specific moment, but the drinking just it serves you less and less and less. I know you're not really a drinker, right? But you start to right the 3-day depressions that come with being hungover, what it does to you physically as well. Just became enough for me, and I've spent plenty of time not drinking at all. I said to Dan, I do this right. New Year's Eve, I had a couple of beers and I didn't drink anything until after the 50K race. It was just something I said I'd do, and I did. Since that 50K race, I've had another beer and a glass of wine. Um, but it doesn't rule me anymore. That's for sure.
Mm.
Something I choose to do in moderation occasionally, very rarely.
Yeah, there was a quote that I heard a long time ago, which stuck with me for very, very, in a very strong way, because it changed the way I saw the use of alcohol, which is most people drink as self-medication.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah,
With-
it's the I think as far as intention goes, a lot of people use alcohol as medication more than any other medication we can think of.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I'd heard some people. Ozzy Osbourne said this in a documentary once. Like he believes it's one of the most dangerous drugs in the world because of the availability. As soon as you turn 18 in most countries of the world, you can walk down and buy as much of it as you like.
Oh, it's actually number one. There's
Yeah.
research that they did a long time ago where can't quote me on this exactly because I saw this on a running YouTube video at this conference thing. But the most the most damaging drug as a list, number one is alcohol because number one's alcohol. Number two is I think nicotine.
Yeah, I
Number
believe.
three is actually excessive use of caffeine. I believe a lot of caffeine, and
I'll take it.
then actually 4, 5, 6 is like heroin, cocaine, MDMA. It's those ones that are and cannabis. It's the ones that are really demonized. They're at the bottom. But number one's actually alcohol.
Yeah, and then having done probably everything on that list, I'll agree. Right? These things are called illicit and they're illegal. They definitely don't do the same kind of damage. Maybe it's the availability. Maybe it's not. Right? But I think that the fact that it's just become in Western countries, especially Australia, it's just become so normalized, right? I spent some time talking with a psychologist, maybe towards the back end of some lockdowns or something like that, and he said, like, if you think about it, like, until someone points it out to you, you kind of know. But in Australia, like, we drink because it's Friday, because it's Monday, Saturday, or Sunday, right? A drink for a death, for a birth, for a marriage, for a divorce. It doesn't matter. We don't need a reason. We just justify it however we want.
Hmm.
It
Exactly.
just everything.
Yeah. It's the only drug where you are the weird one for not wanting to consume it.
Yeah,
Yeah. At a party, are you drinking? No. Why? You're no
yeah,
fun. You're no
yeah,
fun. You're not drinking. You're no fun.
yep. And I think about shit all the time like that. Like, do you know Courtney Joyce?
No.
And I'll put you onto his page, right? Dan put me onto him originally, and like he talked about being uncommon amongst uncommon people. And there was a light bulb moment for him amongst some very, very successful business people at a conference or something from memory. And he's like, they were drinking. And he's like, what about if I don't drink amongst them? And that's like a feeling of power almost. Like you're you're not better than them or anything at all. Like we're all very equal. But it's just like making that conscious decision that I don't have to be a part of this. And I just don't think it serves people very, very well. In saying that, I haven't given it away, and I don't think I will give it away. It's just that I've learnt to not use it as a medication.
Yeah. Well, it's the intention behind it. I think there's a very big difference between having a beer because you're enjoying some downtime, for example, and you know you have control over when to stop.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, I feel shit, have a beer. I feel anxious, have a beer. That is when things get really, really tricky because the more you have, the worse you feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the worse you feel, the more you have.
Yeah. And I could tell you the cycle for me. It was um, Fridays. That probably start on a Friday, right? So that's the end of your work week. Occasionally you would work Saturdays, but more often than not, I go to work hungover. You drink a fair bit Friday night. Maybe you go to work, maybe you don't. You drink a bit Saturday, definitely Sunday too, because like I would wring every drop out of the weekend. Um, and then you would spend Monday feeling very sorry for yourself, usually in trouble with the family. Uh, Tuesday, sometimes have a drink, but then again, Wednesday, you're straight back into it. Thursday, hungover, so you don't drink. And Friday, you start the process again. This was my life for some time. Wasn't like clockwork all the time in those days and numbers, but man, I can tell you what it's like to know where all the bottle shops are in Sydney based on where you're working, what I'm going to drive past on the way home. Um, yeah, it's a it's a pretty
You became a almost a professional alcohol drinker. You knew all the spots. Like you knew if I drive this route, there's a bottle shop here.
yeah, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
and even to the point of value for money. For look, I still drank everything that I liked the taste of, but it became if I'm going to spend X amount on this, that has more alcohol and bang for buck per milliliter and blah blah blah. Like that's a pretty shitty way of thinking,
Mm,
and
mm.
I did for some time.
Yeah. It's amazing what you're describing to me because I'm seeing it as a pattern. I'm seeing it as your mind has entered this route where is constantly just trying to fuel the cycle that it's on. It's repeating that pattern. I drink, I'm going to look for more drinks, I'm going to feel sorry for myself, and then I'm going to drink again. That's what it's looking for. And you're just carrying that out. Like you're not even conscious of what you're doing. You're just carrying it out consistently.
Yeah, without a doubt. Exactly what happened. And look, the root causes behind all of it, I'm still working on,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, yeah, I mean, I know, I, we talk a bit. I listen to your podcast a lot, and the whole idea behind so many stereotypes or blanket, sayings for this and that, what's going on with people's mental health these days, can be a bit wishy-washy. But um, there probably is deeper reasons why I've done this to myself for a long, long time. Whether it's just dealing with responsibility and fear properly, um, anxiousness, or the whole idea of possible traumas from childhood, whatever it is, man. Like I take responsibility for everything I've done, and I just look to continually grow into a better person every day.
Yeah, cool. Because at the end of the day, what matters is what you're going to do. Right? How do you move forward? How do you make the better choice every day? And I'm with you there with the emotional things being wishy-washy. Sometimes we spend too much time trying to figure out why when we don't really know exactly why that is. What's important is everyone has a choice when they wake up. What am I going to do today? I'm not going to do that because I know where that goes. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to focus on the things that are going to move me towards the right direction.
I mean, it's definitely hard at times, you know. Obviously, follow your social medias, and we see each other's journey, and we talk a bit too, right? So we know it's not always easy,
Mm.
um, but the consistency is key for sure. You know, done is better than perfection. So just it's kind of where I have just changed my life in a lot of ways. You know, like the training's not easy all the time. It's rarely easy if you're doing it right. Um, you know, a clean diet is you can learn to like it within reason, right? But if you go and to eat quality carbs and proteins and vegetables and all that sort of stuff, it's not as good as a quarter pounder, right? But
No, I like my KFC. I do like a good wicked wing.
yeah, so it becomes like I know you and Dan spoke a bit on discipline and how it is a bit of a fad word as well, but um, it just becomes a bit more of a regiment, you know, just a change in the way you do things, right?
Yeah.
Acknowledging that nothing's really good or bad. It's just that you just try to make the right decisions more often than not.
Yeah. You just align it with where you want to be, which person you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember just before we move on, I want to get into a bit of your racing soon. But so far, man, I don't know what you're nervous about. You're quite lucid and when you speak about what you're going through, it's very clear.
I
Very
do like
clear.
it, definitely. But it's probably always just that first step, right? Like of anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What I wanted to say is in terms of the alcohol, I stopped drinking when well, was not a big drinker anyway, because I always lived this life of athletic performance ever since I was 18, 19.
Yeah.
And so I could never justify missing a training session because I was hungover. Too much on the line. So that's where it started. It was a practical reason. But during my off season, I will still have a drink here and there. In fact, one of my routines when I was working full time was I like to unwind every night with one glass of gin and tonic. That was my thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started meditating quite deeply the last couple of years. And I realized when you learn to observe your thought, when you just watch what's going through, if I even have one cup or one standard drink and I'm observing my thoughts, they are so negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so just aware that I'm thinking about things that I'm not happy about. My thoughts are more violent, they're more angry, they're more anxious, just from one standard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and when I realized this, I thought, holy shit. Now
yeah.
I can see why people are in this really negative spiral, even off just one drink.
Yeah. Yeah, it can happen, definitely. And like I applaud the people that are well and truly in control of all that sort of stuff. It just um and I like I said, I've said it a couple of times now. I don't ever want to. If I have to lose it, it's not about losing it. Sorry. If I ever choose to not drink, that'll be my choice. Or if I feel like it was ever out of control again, I don't see that happening personally. To have a social thing with some people, that's okay with me, right? And I know where I came from, and it won't go there again. It's pretty much where I stand on it these days.
Yeah, good for you,
Yeah,
man.
you're right. It does. Just even small amount can change things. Yeah.
Yeah, good for
The,
you, man.
for me, this sort of leads into the running part, right? That I'd had a lot less to drink in the last couple of years, but especially the last 12 months as training ramped up under Dan's guidance, it just became very aware how well you could train even after one or two drinks. Um, if I had say one, two, three, four on a Saturday night, Monday morning with a tempo run coming, and it just wasn't the same as if I had nothing to drink on that Saturday night.
Hmm.
So yeah, it just became much more aligned with what I was enjoying in life, right? And yeah, running just became the next evolution.
Yeah, the great thing you mentioned is you were able to notice that your drinking on a Saturday would affect your run on a Monday. So where I take that with anyone who talks about alcohol is you're only looking at your running outcome. But what I see is your running outcome is based off your ability to fire signals from your brain. So if you are running worse, your time's worse, it's not just because your muscles haven't recovered. It's not just because your blood's not flowing better. It's also because the alcohol had lingering effects on your brain's ability to send signals to get you to run in that pace. So
Yeah, sure. Massive
your
effect.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I never considered it around the meditation thing. That's all a little newer to me than some of the other guys. But yeah, I can see exactly where your thoughts would be darker or just in general not as positive.
Hmm.
On the smallest amount of alcohol. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
textbook.
I mean, you've experienced it yourself. After a bender, the third day, you feel like trash. It's just that's like the end point almost. That's where it's when it's really bad, but it's like a sliding scale.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So now we've cut the alcohol back. Now we're running. So what moved you into, first of all, the increased running, but then eventually tackling a 50K?
And if we were to go back right from the get go, I was quite active as a kid. You would never catch me at home. It was BMX, uh, rugby league, even just at the creek catching snakes. It was just always doing something.
Catching snakes.
Probably more so lizards, right? But or,
That's the
yeah,
most Aussie thing ever. Oh, just catching snakes by the creek.
um,
Okay, good
yeah,
one.
always out, always active, always in good shape for the most part. Um, but then, skateboarding, whatever it might be. And then a few years go by, later in teenage years, because I really was one of those kids who um, pocket money, a part-time job of Hungry Jacks. We'd find ways to get alcohol underage and sit at the park on a Friday night drinking, whatever, right? So that's only a small period. You get out of shape, you drink too much, whatever. And then, like many kids in their early 20s, the vanity muscles become real important, right? So, um, plenty of mates doing steroids at the time or whatever it may be. But yeah, spent enough time in the gym and in a calorie deficit, so you had great looking abs and just yeah, right. So that happened, and then I met my wife, and you know the comfort zone really fucking kills the not dreams for exactly right, but you do get comfortable. And
Oh,
I
you got
said,
comfortable when you met your wife?
yeah, so the training dropped off.
Oh,
Been together for a year, so right, and I wasn't terribly out of shape, but I wasn't in great shape. So
yeah, you got the boyfriend. There's a term for that. There's the boyfriend fluff.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
But
So
you were a happy man, I bet.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So to tie it all into how running started, get out of shape a lot, right? As being a dad, you spend a lot of time worrying about your kids and your family's needs and blah blah blah. After I'd put on a fair bit of weight from still drinking fairly heavily and giving up smoking, if you've smoked a bit in the past, right? But
Yeah.
when I went from a pack a day and I quit cold turkey, had some patches for whatever that period is, 3 months, and I just replaced cigarettes with like Tim Tams and
Oh no.
Fritos and you name it, everything that's super high calorie, um, and it just tasted good. So yeah, put on a fair bit of weight, and the first conscious decision for me was just clothes aren't fitting right anymore, and you bought some bigger ones and they don't fit right. So I started out probably really cleaning up my diet, and then I would walk a little, and I definitely felt embarrassed to step into a gym in the shape I was in. I look back at it now, and I got the same amount of respect for the guy deadlifting 300 as the guy who's in there for the first time. Um, Anyone in there trying to better themselves is a hero to me. Um, so after I dropped a bit of weight, I started walking and just putting in some uh, very quick walks, some longer ones, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be. And then I was a bit naive. I had this mate Jono who talked about park run on a Saturday, and I just thought he ran around the park on a Saturday.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I had no idea it's like this worldwide initiative that exists in every other council. So this whole time I'm trying to get like a little wildcard entry to come along with him, and he's never. I don't know if he. It wasn't that he wasn't inviting me. He's like, you don't need me, just go. So I I found out the park run's like an event every Saturday, everywhere, and then I went, well, I can't run. So I asked Jono what he did, and he's like, just run 5K, and no matter how slow you go, don't walk. Just don't don't stop the running motion, no matter how slow you get. So it took me 38 minutes and a heart rate of 200 or something. Um, I was not in good shape, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was
Oh
terrible.
my God. 200 beats per
Yeah,
minute at 30 something minutes is that's pain city, man.
yeah, it was horrible, man. I pretty much turned into a puddle, and yeah, it wasn't a good experience. But that was just down the road from here. We got some pathways, and nobody saw me, and that's what I needed. Like I can get, I want to get better at this. I need to, even from that first one. So yeah, I did that, and I did a couple more, and then I showed up to parkrun on Saturday at Camden here, which is now the local, and made a lot of good friends through there. Um, I can't remember if I went with Jono for the first time or I went on my own, but yeah, I started improving 5K times, and somewhere in amongst this, Sam Bardo, the chiropractor, right, which you guys know each other from Adonis, I mentioned to him that I'd been running because I got a mate that's a running coach, and after stalking Dan's Instagram for a month, I reached out and messaged him, and we had more in common than you would have imagined. Just, you know, you
Yeah.
meet everyone you get to meet, right? And the similarities in our lives, and just stories and food and shoulder dislocations, and
And
you know,
beard. And
times.
beard.
Yeah. So there was just some chats back and forth, and I didn't want to commit to anything big, so it was just using one of the templates originally, which had a 7 or 14 day block as far as some tempo stuff, and lactate threshold testing, and some longer runs. So I used that, and probably improved 5K times. Did some, so, with Dan, a lot of stuff can. I'm not sure what all coaches do. I know some use distance rather than time, but I like the time method, and that's a whole other conversation, right? But I noticed that in 60 minutes on a Saturday morning, every other Saturday I was getting 500 meters more in, according to my watch or whatever. So yeah, you see these improvements, and then something happened, and I said, "That's it. Let's lock it in. I, I want to be coached by you, and your guidance, and there's no one better in my opinion." But it was a step in the right direction, and I can't remember where the conversation came about doing the 50K, but well before I knew many of who I consider now really good friends amongst the Camden parkrun group, before I knew any of them were all involved in running UTA, and some people almost like life members, right? But me and Dan spoke about this, and I'm like, all right, I'll run this 50K. So we start preparing for that. and there were some things along the way, a 30K race. Um, but yeah, the real cool thing was speaking with some of the people. The guy named Steve Cooper. Originally, it was a conversation with him. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this 50K in Katoomba this year. And he's like, yeah, man, I've done it several times. Done the 100 several times too. And I'm like, wow, this thing's like a real thing. Like lots of people get involved. He's like, yeah, it's like 6,000 runners go there or something like that. And that was when I realized it's a big thing. Like here I was thinking like naive that I'd be like one of the only guys in Camden going to this thing. And man, it just turned out to be one of the best weekends of my life with some of the best people I know.
It seems to be a pattern with you, Luke. Park run. Oh, it's just a park run. No, it's just gonna be me. No one's there anyway. And then it's UTA. Oh, it's just some long trail.
Well, I never read into things that much. Oh, sorry, that's a lie. But it was more like some things. The more you know, the more there is to be fearful of. Like I had no idea about the elevation or the fact that there were 8,000 steps. It was just like Dan's like, I want you to run this many meters vertically this week. I want you to get this many time on stairs in. I'm like, no worries, we'll do it. Um, and I don't know if that's under preparing for something. A lot of people in elite level will probably consider that, but I was just like, the more you know, the more there is to be scared of.
No,
So
you're absolutely correct. I actually think that there's a lot of value in the right coaches who omit certain parts of information. I think omitting information is just as skillful as providing information.
yeah,
Because you don't like look, if I knew that you were gonna go run, I don't know, 1,000 meters above sea level in one steep incline, and I told you this a year in advance, I don't think it's gonna help you any more than me just telling you, hey, you're gonna run 50 meters more each week.
yeah. Yeah, I think there's good and bad in both of it, right? It was Dan definitely didn't omit anything. Like we had a training plan and I stuck to it mostly. If anything, had a few road moments. Um, but we can talk about that. But yeah, I think I wanted to a little bit bury my head in the sand and like not hide from it. It was just like I felt like what would it serve me by knowing how bad this is going to get? I'm going to do it anyway. Let's find out on the day.
Yeah, I have the same experience when I used to spar with fighters from Thailand, when I used to train over there.
Yeah,
I The less I knew about them when we sparred, the better, because the more you know about them, the more respect you give them. And you're like, oh my God, this guy's a fighter. I'm gonna have to be careful. But I would leave sparring sessions and it'd be all really safe because we're all really we have a lot really good etiquette. But afterwards they said you should fight because you just held your own with a fighter. I had no idea. It's just because I didn't know. So I didn't give them the respect that they usually get because they're a fighter. It's just another dude. So let's just see what happens.
or someone that might have watched their fights or whatever go into it with a certain amount of nerves because of their record or something.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So it's the same thing as what you just described. It's almost sometimes way better for that person.
Yeah. So yeah, to keep going on it, if you want, right? We had this training plan, and along the way, the milestones. Man, I get real impatient, right? And Dan's just like, man, you got to trust the process. And now I do wholeheartedly, right?
Yeah.
Moments in me where it's just like, why can't we rush this? Or why isn't this happening sooner? Or whatever it may be. But I can hold my head high, right? The fact that I started running in April last year at a 38-minute 5K. And then 2 weeks ago, I did a 20 flat. So I feel like that's some good improvement.
I think that's a great improvement.
Trusting the process. And dedicating to it, right? So yeah, there's lots of back and forth in this running story, that's for sure. But amongst like there's a lot of people's names, and I don't think they would mind me talking about it, right? But just certain people that are really important and influential in this journey, right? So and it even comes back to the first time I think might have been a message back and forth. But at the Christmas meetup, um, when we met for the first time in person,
Yeah.
and Dan and Tina and Eamon and Sasha and many others there. Some I don't talk to as much as you guys, but to be part of that is like real. That's something that I'll never ever forget. And the more I'm reading and learning recently about these, I heard you talk about it in the chat with Dan recently, like how there's seasons within your life, and I've been reading, listening about the friends that are they might be with you for one season, right? But I'd like to think that the people I've met in the last 2 years, especially surrounding the fitness and running, lifting, whatever it may be, I I refuse to accept that any one of you are going to be single season friends, right? So
Yeah.
that's just the way it's been. Like this starts to get a little bit morbid, kind of, but the friends that I lost, like best friend, because I didn't want to go to the pub every other day with him anymore, or the common denominators were drinking and negative stuff, whinging about this guy or that guy or whatever it was. So yeah, my best friend, I saw him on Sunday. Call it a former best friend if you want, but yeah, I saw him on Sunday for the first time in over a year. We passed each other in the alleyway to the bathroom in a shopping centre, and there was nothing more than 3 or 4 seconds. It's like there is nothing in common anymore. He was best man at my wedding, and vice versa. But when when I would forever reach out to have a different relationship other than alcohol, and it wasn't reciprocated, it was showing respect to myself by just stopping. Like, I'm not gonna. You don't want to return my phone calls. You can't respect it. I don't want to get drunk with you every weekend. I'm not saying I'm turning my back on you, but we just grew apart, right?
Mm.
And I felt like my circle shrunk for a long time. It's growing again now, but the quality is significantly different. Like the people in my life now are head and shoulders above the people I've known for the previous 20 years.
Mm.
Most of you guys I've known for a year or less.
Yeah, it's just a different you're not in that loop anymore,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
It's and this goes also into how damaging alcohol as a substance is, because it is a great social lubricant.
yeah,
It does make you have the false sense that you have friends that you really don't.
yeah. And I think
Because yeah, sorry, go on. No, go on.
a bit of like you get anxious amongst the crowd, right? So yeah, that lubricant side of things is definitely there, and it just gets worse and worse. You if that was all it was, it might be a couple of drinks, but man, I've seen multiple sunrises in the same session with people. That's not just social lubricant. That's just a real problem.
Mhm.
And yeah, so yeah, that hurt me for ages and still does at times. But I've got enough respect for myself now to accept that although they seemed like real friends at the time, and it still hurts at times, like I'd known this particular guy for, man, 28 years. So, yeah, at times it has its moments, but yeah, the people I know now are, although you might not see them as regularly, they don't have as much in common yet. You're still getting to know each other in many ways, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not scared to get to know these people without alcohol, especially, or just get to know them in general. Times
Yeah.
are changing. Better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's that circle of influence. You know, you influence others, like you are very conscious that you yourself are the pillar of influence for your children,
Yeah,
and how you are will affect your children, but also who you surround yourself with will affect you, which then will also affect your children.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's it. And I feel like to go back to the running, my middle child, she comes a bit to parkrun. She loves to volunteer with me there. She hasn't done the track yet, but it just goes to show like it's not as much as running. I love it and I hate it. The community and the people I've met. If look, I've got a bit of a knee injury at the moment, and if I could never run again, I wouldn't be okay with that. But I could have some happiness in the people I've met because of it. The community's like everything to me.
Or the running, I think community in general for everyone is the most important quality in their life. There's a lot of, I mean, we don't really need research for this, but there is research that's showing loneliness and social isolation is by far the biggest killer of people, irrespective of other substances as well. It's such a big problem in some countries where the World Health Organization has now listed loneliness as a first world crisis, essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's numerous research that shows the biggest improvement in your mortality rate, in your life expectancy, is how connected you are with your community. We
yeah,
are people, we are social creatures. We need to have friends, we need to be bonded, we need to feel connected with people. And many times when people are isolated for too long, that's when things start to go a bit wonky.
yeah, man. I agree. I agree. Yeah, the community, whether it's here, the family or extended community with work, or more so now because of the newer friends, like people relating to Dan and the mob there and this circle, or yeah, my mate Jono and his dad who kind of first got me at it. I've got a mate Richard, right? We talk about all different training programs all the time. He still serves in the military, and we kind of egg each other on a bit, right? And encourage. And so, yeah, I feel like the community now in my life that aren't drug addicts and alcoholics, they just they serve your experience so much better.
Yeah,
And
and when you're in it, you don't see it. But when you're out of it, you can see it very clearly.
yeah, and it's not to say I didn't have some dark times with it too. So the particular friends that you spend so much of your teenage and 20s with, who are now longer, they're gone from your life, right? Because you don't want to sit around smoking weed all day with them, or golf was just another excuse to drink, or whatever it was, right? So yeah, I definitely had some darker times adjusting to that. Still do a little, but I'm definitely accepting it, and like, man, perspective. I talk about it so much, right? It's just like I can choose to let it get me down. I'm winning there.
Mm. Good for you, man. Really good for you. And good for you for choosing to take that step of improving, just trying to be better, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your family, or whether it's just for your your next door neighbor. You're always choosing to be a better version of yourself as opposed to allowing yourself to go backwards into where you already know you can't be.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It had to be done. It really did. It was, um, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all taxing things on me. Um, yeah, and just learning, forever learning, right? But yeah, I'm very, very grateful to have found running. As much as I hate it, I, I'm a little miserable now that I can't run as much as I can because of a bit of an
Yeah.
injury. So it's it's a double-edged sword in that regard. Um, but yeah, I can't see it like I talked with Dan at the start, like um, I could just never felt like a runner. And I know you've talked in many things about like imposter syndrome, and I don't. necessarily resonate with that, but it's just like you see what other people are achieving in running, and when you compare, you never feel like you're not saying good enough, right? I just didn't feel like a runner. And, and Dan's like, dude, if you walk out that front door and run, you're a runner. That's it. End of story. And it just took me a while to, you know, to come to terms with that. And now I just can't see it any other way.
Well, Dan's had this one great quote where he said, "I hate running, but I run anyway, and that's what makes me a runner."
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I have the moments where I hate it with a passion, but then there's other times where I really, really like it when I'm struggling with emotion or whatever, and you get a run in, or the runner's high that comes at times for no reason, running on your own, running with a group, whatever it is. There's like I think Dan said it talking with you the other day. There's definitely moments that are like really, really special, but it is very, very hard too, and to get yourself up and do it all the time, to want to improve, it's hard. Like, you know, you've been there and done it with elite level lifting, like so many days. Mate, this morning I didn't really think about it until I listened to your chat with Dan again today, just sort of in preparation, like how you might answer questions, right? But I got a whole bunch more shit out of it again. And it wasn't until I'd listened to it a second time today that I really resonated. I got up this morning and the alarm goes off at 3:30, 4 o'clock, whatever it was. I set it one of those two times, depending on when I get to bed. And I got a bit of a ritual now with meditation and journaling and making breakfast. And I just didn't want to train. Like it was lifting day, and I made eggs as slow as I possibly could, hoping that time would tick over and I just have to go straight to work. And the eggs are ready. I'm like, I gotta eat them. They're going cold. And I tried to make every excuse not to go to the gym, but I just couldn't. I ran out of excuses and I went, and it was awesome. It was a really successful day. Like it was good. Like I felt really, really good. But yeah, we have those times. I have them heaps where I just don't want to, but the challenge and beating that becomes the important part, not not finishing just the run for the sake of the run, or the strength session for the sake of the strength session. It's about, you know, beating the voices that just don't want to do it. Becomes important to me.
Well, what you just described is something that I talk about a lot when I teach the guys at the performance camps or experiences that I run. You mentioned meditation, and you've done some of the ones that I've had on my podcast. But one of the things I talk about is you observe your mind for what it is, and then you realize that the fact that you are observing means that you are separate from your mind. What you just described in terms of you noticed that your mind's giving you all these excuses, reasons not to go to the gym, making your eggs slow. There's all these reasons. You've observed this. So you yourself, there's a separation because there's something that you want to do, and then there's the voices that are telling you what you don't want to do. And you're in this constant tension.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, you're choosing not to conform to what your mind's trying to do, which is stay in comfort. You're choosing to, okay, I'm going to bypass this. I'm going to go do my thing. And I want to circle this back towards your ability to say no to alcohol too. And also having been an alcoholic, how gripping your mind can be. It's so gripping that if you identify with that voice inside that's telling you, let's drink, let's do this, you're run by your mind, which sounds trippy to most people, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying. You are actually being governed by your thoughts. But then once you get to this stage where you can kind of fight between it and you can observe that there's a difference between what you're thinking versus what you want to do, That's when you separate yourself and you can say to yourself, I am not my mind. I am not my thoughts. I can choose what I do here.
Yeah, you do. And once you become, I don't think anyone's completely in control of it. We all have dark thoughts and anxious moments and stuff, definitely. But once you start to become more aware, for me anyway, you definitely have more wins. That's for sure. Yeah, the challenge, like just some other friends and their kind of like their mottos, like one friend, she talks about, like I can do hard things, and she gets them done all the time, finishing 100K with a partner. Just like it's impressive shit. But I think for me, it was just too many years of saying no to the hard things and yes to the easy things. Like it's easy to give in to the demons that to drinking the alcohol. It's a lot harder to kick an addiction. Same with nicotine. Same to create. Like I know that there is black and white studies on how long it takes to form a habit or whatever you want to look at it, but just to put it in place and stay consistent with it, definitely having more wins in the right directions now.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Like that's the challenge. There's always a comfortable
Yeah.
way to go. Even if it's nothing to do with substance, there's always that. Let's just stay in bed today.
Like the cold, I think this winter, before kind of this knee playing up a little, getting out and running at 6 degrees or whatever it is, it sucks. It really
Yeah,
does.
yeah, it does. It
You know,
does.
put gloves on and you lose them, and you look for that as an excuse. And man, you just pull your hands into the sleeves of your jumper and go anyway. Whatever it is, yeah, it just definitely you fight back, or you get better at fighting back to the doubt and the reasons why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either
Absolutely.
listening or fight them, whichever way. I don't know how I see it, but I just know I always feel better um, when I don't pull the pin. Although I haven't pulled the pin on a lot of runs, just one recently where this was discussed that this is possibly doing damage because the injury is not really healing like I'd like to. So yeah, if it caused pain after X amount, just walk home. And I can hold my head high knowing that I could have run through the pain, but I chose not to because that's just stupid in this case. It
Yeah,
wasn't
that
right.
in itself is probably one of the greatest challenges for anyone who wants to improve. There is a point where all of us have a much slower rate of improvement, and if you try and rush that, you get hurt. And if you are hurt and you try and come back early, you're going to be hurt some more.
Yeah. Well, like we talked the other day, I know I had a bit of a whinge at you, man, with just some hard shit going on. I'm like, I'm just sick of the lessons at the moment, like there's a lesson in everything, and I just wanted a break with a lot going on in life. And I'm the perspective is right now. It's teaching me patience and um, a much greater respect. You can do nothing at times, but it's not nothing. Like I know you guys talked about it recently. Like, yeah, you can't run, but I can still read. I can still lift. Um, I've been doing other forms of cardio. Just running's taken a back seat, and it's just been a bit hard to deal with that mentally. Um, so yeah, there's the lesson in that for me.
Yeah,
Got no quit.
you're taking actionable positive out of a situation that isn't ideal.
Yeah, and I definitely couldn't at first. I Yeah, I ran when I shouldn't have. And like that 5K PB a couple of Sundays ago, I wasn't even supposed to run that day. It was just for reasons I won't talk about. I just had to let go of some steam. The Western Sydney Run Club are meeting at the track, and I went down, and it turned out to be exactly what I needed. But the next day, the pain and yeah, so just definitely got some lessons from all that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, man, it's been really good to chat with you. I just want to ask you one last thing before you go. What's next? What's next for you training wise? What's next for you in terms of self-improvement? Where's
Well,
Luke's head's at?
the next bit training wise is I'd like to knock off 100K. If my knee copes like it's been going better in the last few days, that may happen this year, but I'm not going to put pressure on myself unrealistically. Beyond the running, just the continual self-improvement of stuff, like to become more in tune with emotion and deal with things in a positive way, in all aspects of the family, uh, work, whatever it may be, every relationship. But just, and it's I feel like it's just continual, like in all aspects that have served me in the last couple of years. Just to stay consistent, right? That's probably a blanket answer. Stay consistent with improvement.
Well, look, I've worked with quite a few dads now, I would say. And all of you guys have this one thing in common, which is there's this constant striving to be a better father. There's this constant striving to be a better man. And I'm not a dad yet, so I can't comment exactly on what you're going through, and I won't try to. But if it's anything like any other industry, then it's not about what you do. It's about constantly having that intention to be better and be better. So everything I've heard you talk about in terms of your fear and anxiety around being a good dad and raising them right, that is, from an observer's perspective, it seems like a very worthwhile and responsible thing to be having. Because on the flip side, if I was speaking to a father who said, you know what, if you fuck up, you fuck up, fuck it.
Yeah.
That would probably be a more concerning disposition compared to what you're saying, which is, I want to be better. I want to improve. I know I can be better. I'm going to keep being that thing. Then as an outsider, I would say, that's pretty cool, man. I think that's what we all should strive for, whether it's a father or just being a human being.
Yeah, man, I believe now more than ever, there's only one real finish line in life. Why not just continue to get better every day if you can? That's all I'm hoping for.
Thank you, Luke, for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, mate. Talk soon.
Talk soon, man.